Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. We have the latest updates on the Nancy Guthrie disappearance. Convicted murderer Alec Murdaugh, well, he's battling for a retrial. Chilling threats turn deadly. A little homework frustration escalates into an assault. We've all been there. And a trusted caregiver exposed in a shocking abuse of a vulnerable patient. We've got this day in legal history, our quote of the day, and our dumb criminal. Let's talk about it.
All right, lawyer.
Good day, everyone. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. Thanks for joining us. You know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't, like if you do, leave me a comment below, hit that little bell for notifications, and remember, you can check us out on any of your favorite podcasting apps. Now, before we get to the docket, let me remind you to go to crimetalksearch.com. Sign up for that background subscription service today. When you do, you'll be able to do as many background checks on anybody coming into your life as your heart desires, as long as they're here in the United States. And when you get that report, it's literally prepared while you wait and then emailed to you. And you can even get updates as supplements come in. And it's going to give you information about one's social media presence, email addresses, phone numbers. You're going to find out if they've married, divorced, do they have liens, judgments against them. And you're going to find out if they have a criminal history. And, well, do they have to appear on one of those sex offender registries? Everything you want to know about somebody, ladies and gentlemen, you will find out. Could be a few surprises, but better to find out now than before you let this person into your life. Think about it. Not just the people that are, maybe you're going to date them on a website. You know, you don't want to commit dating malpractice. Check them out. Maybe somebody's coming and do work in your home. Check them out. Maybe your kids are hanging out with a new kid. Who are their parents? Check them out. Go to crimetalksearch.com. You're going to be happy that you did. All right, let's go ahead and get to the docket today for Wednesday, February 11th, 2026. I want to thank everybody who joined us last night for our Tuesday night live program. It was a big show indeed. And we also went live today because I didn't have any court, but we're going to give you everything here in a nice, concise manner in our daily show. So first on the docket, yes, the masked intruder. Police have intensified their search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, mother of Today Show host and co-host Savannah Guthrie, who vanished from her Tucson, Arizona home on February 1st of 2026. Now, surveillance footage recovered by the FBI shows a masked individual armed with a handgun and wearing gloves and a backpack, approaching the front door and then tampering with the doorbell camera at about 2:12 a.m. that morning. Now, the camera disconnected shortly before and Guthrie's pacemaker app lost connection at 2:28 a.m., with her phone being left behind at the residence. Now, the Guthrie family apparently has received a $6 million Bitcoin ransom demand over the weekend with a deadline of February 9th, which obviously has come and gone. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings have publicly appeared on various social media platforms, begging for her safe return via Instagram and expressing their willingness to meet the demands and pleading for public assistance. Now, despite the deadline passing without further known communication, the FBI maintains a 24-hour command post and has deployed additional resources to the area. And then on February 10th, last night, law enforcement detained a 36-year-old individual by the name of Carlos Palazuelos, a DoorDash driver from Rio Rico, Arizona, during a traffic stop as a person of interest. Now, Palazuelos, who denied any involvement and stated he did not know the Guthries, was held for several hours without being advised of his Miranda rights, according to him, leading to physical discomfort from handcuffs, as he gave a little bit of a statement outside of his house. Now, police searched his home, seized his cell phone and a vehicle, but released him without any charges and after no questioning, and they gave his car back as well. Now, in an interview outside of his residence, Palazuelos emphasized his innocence and called for the real perpetrator to be apprehended so that his good name could be cleared. Now, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, assisted by the FBI, obviously continues with the investigation, including the searches in the Rio Rico area, while urging tips to their designated hotlines. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is getting more bizarre. I thought for sure when they talked about having people being detained last night that this is going to be solved within the 24 hours, that there was reports that the Bitcoin account, there was some activity, and they must have given themselves. Now we hear today that TMZ is reporting another note, and the person is willing to provide information as to who the real kidnapper is for only 1 Bitcoin, not 6 million in Bitcoin. Today's Bitcoin, I think, is like $56,000. You would think that individual would just call the FBI tip line, give their information, and then they can get the $50,000 reward that the person is basically demanding. Makes me think that it is a hoax. The more things go on, I'm starting to think, is there really a kidnapping? I mean, yes, there's a kidnapping, but is there really a ransom to be paid? All right, we talked about this last night on the live. I'll tell you this again. I've never kidnapped anybody, but I've represented people that have. And usually a kidnapping involves, one, no police involvement. You send the note directly to the family, and you want cash. All right. And you want it all done rather quickly. You don't wait 10, 11 days into it to try to get your money. It doesn't work that way. And you also show proof of life up front to say, here it is. And if you don't pay the money, this is what's going to happen. Right? Those types of things. All right. I got a kidnapping going on right now. Didn't pay the ransom. Allegedly, boom, chopped a finger off. Just as good faith effort to show they were serious. I represent people that kidnap people, allegedly. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, whoever is doing this, and if they're trying to get money out of it, they're complete amateurs. They're no good. Maybe these guys should be publicly shamed instead of saying, oh, we care about our mom. We want Nancy back. We do. I understand that. We want her safe return. But these guys are amateurs, and they should probably be publicly humiliated and shamed. And ultimately, when they're arrested, they should be. All right. The FBI will find them. I do believe that. And I do hope for Nancy Guthrie's safe return. But time is running out. Hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the sheriff themselves said time was of the essence, given the fact that Miss Guthrie had medication that she needed, I believe heart medication, blood pressure medication that goes to her life. Next, Alec Murdaugh battles to get a retrial. In the South Carolina State Supreme Court, there was a showdown. That's right. Disgraced attorney Alec Murdaugh, serving a multiple life sentences for the 2021 murder of his wife and son, is pursuing a new trial through an appellate process now before the South Carolina Supreme Court. Oral arguments were scheduled for today, February 11th, focusing on the claims of evidentiary errors and jury tampering in the original conviction. Now, the appeal contends that insufficient physical evidence linked Alec Murdaugh to the crime scene, and that certain witnesses in their demonstrations, such as an investigator simulating phone damage, were improperly admitted before the jury. It also highlights omitted text messages between Murdaugh and an associate, which defense attorneys argue skewed the prosecution's timeline. Now, a significant portion of the filing targets former Colleton County Clerk of the Court, Becky Hill, who admitted to perjury and obstruction for sharing sealed exhibits with the media. Now, Murdaugh's defense team alleges that Hill influenced jurors towards a guilty verdict through biased comments motivated by her authorship of a book about the case. Now, though she has denied such misconduct, like I said, she did plead guilty to her crimes. Anyway, Murdaugh has consistently proclaimed his innocence since the verdict, and this is his next process. He's obviously lost at the state level when there were new allegations brought up of Miss Hill. They brought in a senior judge. The senior judge said, well, her conduct was probably inappropriate, but guess what? It's probably didn't change the result in any way. And so, well, we don't like Alec Murdaugh, so let's make that go away. We're going to bring you the video of the arguments that were there today before the Supreme Court. Should be up later today. But here's what you have to remember. All right. Now, everybody has a right to an appeal in a criminal case when they lose. All right. It's an automatic right, usually to the mid-level Court of Appeals, and then ultimately to the Supreme Court, usually by writ of certiorari. And if there are constitutional claims, if you lose at the state court, you can then go to the United States Supreme Court. They don't take a lot of those cases. Usually they're federal cases at the United States Supreme Court. But you only get to appeal, not because you just didn't like the verdict. You have to come up with something in the record that shows that the court made a legal mistake by allowing in evidence or not allowing in some evidence, and therefore it resulted in an unfair trial. And that's what the Murdaugh attorneys are trying to claim, and what they're trying to convince the Supreme Court of, to give him a new trial. We'll all find out at the same time together what happens. Check out the video when we get it up later. Next, some chilling threats turn deadly. So a husband convicted in a post-divorce execution of a teacher. Yeah, let's just say this got a little weird. So in a case marked by escalating hostility, 51-year-old William P. Long Jr. from Ohio has been found guilty of aggravated murder for fatally shooting his former wife, 50-year-old educator Michelle Lewis Long, amid a rancorous divorce settlement. Now, the November 29th, 2023 attack followed Lewis Long securing custody of their son, spousal and child support, and shared assets. Evidence revealed repeated threats from Long, including a recorded statement vowing to kill her and text messages expressing malice, such as blaming her for their elder son's death and the ominous wording like, quote, "You will get it soon," end quote. A witness testified to Long's explicit plans to shoot her, dismissing his claim of mere intoxicated outbursts. Surveillance captured the shooting as Lewis Long arrived home in her car, and a matching truck pulled alongside, and a .44 caliber shot was fired. Investigators linked the ammunition and vehicle details to Long, who claimed to have sold a relevant firearm beforehand. Now, after a swift jury deliberation, the judge imposed a life sentence without the possibility of parole, plus additional time for firearm offenses, affirming the evidence's clarity. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, bottom line is, you're going through a divorce. It's going to be rancorous. It always is. Okay. But when you have kids, listen, if you can't get along for the sake of the children, guess what? A complete stranger, the judge, will make those decisions for you. But murder is never the answer. All right. And as my divorce attorney told me years ago, do you know why divorces are so expensive? Because they're worth it. All right. Now, I hope everybody has a long relationship and marriage, and no need to ever have to go through that. But if for whatever reason it comes to that point, you divide it up and you move along. You don't go killing anybody. All right. Next, homework frustrations turn into an assault. Listen, who hasn't been there? We all have. You know, the kid sitting on the other side of the table, can't do the homework, can't figure it out, wants you to do it, but you're not going to give in. Well, we got a story about that. So a 34-year-old Texas man by the name of Cord Amon Huntley faces charges after allegedly throttling his young son during a homework session over an erroneous math response. Now, the altercation occurred at their Gatesville home in the evening of February 4th of 2025. Now, according to reports, Huntley seized the boy by the shoulders, causing him to fall and injure his back and head on the floor edge. He then gripped the child's chin and throat, yelling and impeding his breathing, leaving the boy terrified and unable to respond. The next day, the child experienced throat pain and swallowing issues at school, later confided with his mother, who alerted the police. The medical examination confirmed bruising consistent with the assault. Huntley was arrested on a $30,000 bond for injury to a child with intentional body harm. Apparently, this marks the second such offense following a 2021 indictment for beating a toddler, resulting in probation. Now, let's face it, once again, we've all been there. Children doing homework, it can be very frustrating. And I get it. You want to strangle them figuratively. Not literally, ladies and gentlemen. Do not do that. All right? Take a deep breath. Let them do it themselves. And if they get a bad grade, they can do the, third grade all over again. Next, a trusted caregiver exposed for some shocking abuse to a vulnerable patient. So police have charged a 41-year-old man by the name of Michael W. Smith with aggravated sexual assault after allegations surfaced of him repeatedly violating a wheelchair-bound woman under his supervision. Now, the offense reportedly spanned from December of 2023 through June of 2024, while the victim, recovering from an accident, was dependent on her care. Now, Smith allegedly transported her to a Ramada Inn multiple times to perpetrate these acts, including sodomy and misuse of a vape-like device. Use your own imagination on that one, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, the victim discovered the abuse on January 18th of 2026 via anonymous videos sent through a messaging app depicting the incident. She promptly reported it to police, leading to Smith's arrest on January 29th in Westfield, New Jersey. He faces 2 first-degree counts of aggravated sexual assault and 1 third-degree count of criminal sexual conduct. What can you do, ladies and gentlemen? Be careful. Now, my guess is, and they've gone to crimetalksearch.com, they probably could have figured out that, well, the guy's got a history. What can you do? Be careful of the people that are coming into your lives that are taking care of your family, ladies and gentlemen. You have to be careful. Next, this day in legal history, February 11th. Let's jump back to 1794. And it was the first session of the United States Senate opened to the public, marking a significant step forward in transparency in the legislative process of the young republic. Yes, if you've ever been to the Capitol, you can actually go in and sit in the upper chambers and watch them do whatever they do. Sometimes it's usually empty, it seems like. Not a whole lot of work going on, which is actually a good thing, because remember, the government that governs least governs best. February 11th, 1812, the Massachusetts governor, Eldridge Gerry, was accused of, quote, gerrymandering, end quote, for the first time, referring to the redrawing of electoral districts to favor one political party, a practice that has influenced American electoral law and politics ever since, and it continues. On this date, February 11th, 1856, oral arguments in the landmark Supreme Court case of Dred Scott v. Sanford commenced. The case was initially argued for 4 days in front of the Supreme Court, February 11th to February 14th of 1856, before being re-argued again in December of the same year for 3 more days. The court's decision, issued on March 6, 1857, held that individuals of African descent could not and were not United States citizens, and they invalidated the Missouri Compromise, obviously significantly impacting the American legal and political history. That's right. The Civil War was soon to come. Terrible decision, obviously overturned later, and we fought a war over that decision. Not a good one. Those justices, not very bright. Next, February 11th, 1903, President Theodore Roosevelt signed the Expedition Act into law, which prioritized antitrust cases in federal court, thereby enhancing enforcement of competing laws and supporting the Progressive Era's effort to regulate monopolies. Remember, he wanted to take away the monopolies, the Standard Oils at the time, J.P. Morgan Chase, the men that built America, all monopolies. And so they wanted to bust them up. The irony is, for example, Mr. Rockefeller, when they broke up Standard Oil, it got broken into all the other little oil companies, and he actually became richer after that because he owned pieces of 11 different oil companies versus just one. How about a quote of the day? As the day pertains to dumb criminals, which is coming up next, consider the following from Daniel R. Butler in his book, The World's Dumbest Criminals. These young, dumb criminals got what they asked for. Better policing, end quote. This statement is a little ironic regarding the consequences often faced by inept offenders when they encounter law enforcement. And then finally, our dumb criminal of the day. Now, in a narrative that rivals the suspense novels that this author so admires, Charles Christopher Martinez, the 48-year-old self-proclaimed chronicler of criminal exploits, finds himself cast as the antagonist once more. Now, the convicted bank robber, whose 2018 autobiography, The Life of an Outlaw, offered readers a purportedly unvarnished glimpse into heists, gang affiliation, and the unforgiving federal prison system, stands accused of orchestrating a fresh robbery in Denver, Colorado. Now, police report that on January 5th, 2026, Martinez allegedly entered a U.S. bank branch demanding funds from a teller and departed the scene. Now, though the precise amount of the ill-gotten gains remains undisclosed, clad in a conspicuous ensemble featuring a vibrant orange jacket, a loose black beanie, and gray sweatpants, the suspect's image was swiftly disseminated via the Joint Crime Alert from the Denver Police Department and the FBI's Safe Streets Task Force. Identification followed promptly, leading to Martinez's arrest on January 8th. By January 12th, law enforcement confirmed his involvement, linking the incident to the authors whose literally debut delved into prior convictions for bank robbery and his alleged ties to the Sereno gang, purportedly under the Mexican mafia influence. In his book promotional summary, Martinez vividly describes navigating the, quote, most ruthless and bloody prisons, end quote, in a dog-eat-dog world, urging readers to follow the true events of a real-life bank robber amid the perils of incarceration. Now, drawing inspiration from esteemed writers such as John Grisham, Bernard Cornwell, and Ken Follett, Martinez positioned his memoir as a gritty insider's account. It garnered a solitary but effusive review on Goodreads, penned by a reader whose son endured the California correctional system, a testament to his resonance, praising the author's courage and extending well wishes for divine protection. Now detained at the Denver County Jail, Martinez appeared in court on February 3rd facing federal charges for bank robbery, an offense that could result in up to 20 years of imprisonment. And as the case transitions to federal jurisdiction, one cannot help but ponder if this episode will inspire a sequel to his outlaw saga, though perhaps from behind bars once again. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. And remember, the Constitution matters.